Number 10. World War II fighter plane. Researchers have discovered a sunken fighter plane from World War II in a rather unusual place. It was discovered just off the very popular tourist destination, Miami Beach. The researchers had been checking out an artificial reef off the coast of Miami-Dade County when they uncovered the intact wreckage of the fighter plane upside down at 240 feet, 73 meters deep. The plane they found is a Grumman F-6F Hellcat, completely crusted over with marine growth. It also happens to be the new home of a group of lionfish. According to the Naval History and Heritage Command, the Hellcat was put into service in 1943 as a fighter plane that could counter the deadly Japanese Zero. Nobody knows exactly where this specific one came from, but we do know that at least 79 of these airplanes were lost off the coast of Florida between 1943 and 1952. This was likely one of those that vanished. Not from fighting, but because training exercise fails. This plane probably never even saw any combat at all. Number 9. Royal Air Force Vehicle Graveyard. There is an abandoned Royal Air Force station where trucks, boats, and all kinds of amazing military vehicles have gone to die. These vehicles include military pieces of hardware all the way from the D-Day attack on Germany to the end of the Cold War. In fact, a lot of vehicles abandoned in this graveyard once helped Britain achieve victory when they stormed the beaches of Normandy over half a century ago. The base itself, which has been untouched and forgotten since 1963, is in Lincolnshire. Huge pieces of deadly machinery from the 1940s are rusting away at the end of a runway, some of them swallowed by trees and bushes. One of the most amazing vehicles you can find here is a DUKW amphibious vehicle produced between 1942 and 1945. The British Army continued to use them until the 1970s. There are also military Caterpillar tractors that were originally dumped on the site 50 years ago. They were a critical part of the war effort, but had no use to Britain once the fighting was over. They were stored with the intention of using them later, at least for parts, but they were never actually used for anything. Number 8. HMS Audacious. Off the coast of Malin, Ireland, there lies a giant's graveyard. In the days of World War II, a navigation route was used by wartime convoys which passed along Malin. In modern times, it's not used for much, but many of the ships from the war are still there, sitting at the bottom of the ocean. One of these vessels is the HMS Audacious, the very first Great British battleship to be destroyed, not in the Second World War, but in the First. The HMS Audacious was a continuation of the original dreadnought that popped up in 1906. At the time, every other battleship on Earth was inferior and obsolete. It had 5 main gun turrets and 25 millimeters of armor. But despite being so heavily protected, the ship was destroyed in October of 1914 from an explosion at the hands of a measly mine. The mine had been laid by the German ship SS Berlin. When the HMS Audacious ran into the mine, it blew up with such force that the ship sank within minutes. 23,000 tons of metal and guns floated gently to the bottom of the ocean, where the wreckage remains to this very day. Number 7. German U-Boat Wreckage. A German submarine, also known as a U-boat, from the First World War was discovered wrecked on the bottom of the ocean by a crew doing a survey for laying power cables. Coincidentally, this happens to be the very U-boat allegedly destroyed by a sea monster off the coast of Scotland. The wreckage of the U-boat is over 100 years old, yet almost completely intact. According to its captain, Gunther Kretsch, the submarine was cruising across the surface of the water so that it could recharge its batteries when a beast rose from the sea, something horrifying with horns and teeth that glistened in the moonlight. The beast was so huge that it managed to damage the forward deck plating, preventing the submarine from submerging. The British military then showed up, a patrol boat called the HMS Coriolis. They captured all the German soldiers and took them prisoner. The official report at the time was that the British destroyed the submarine, not a great big monster. But now we have the actual vessel to investigate for evidence. Unfortunately, it's only been seen through sonar scans because it's at the bottom of the ocean. Until a dive team is organized to go down and properly investigate the U-boat to see how it sank, we won't know if it really was a monster or just some lying Germans. What do you think about this wild story? Was the submarine really attacked by a monster, or were the Germans making it all up? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments below. And if you are liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 6. Japanese ghost ships. 2021 saw a surge of volcanic activity in a chain of islands south of Tokyo. There are about 110 volcanoes in the region, mainly beneath the area around Iwo Jima. With the seismic activity causing the seabed around Mount Suribachi to raise itself up, dozens of Japanese transport vessels that had been lost during the war also rose to the surface. These last military ships were literally pushed out of their watery graves onto the shore by the amazing force of nature. So far as anyone knows, this is the first time in history that volcanic activity actually resurrected ghost ships. The ships weren't that important during the war. They were transport vessels captured by the United States Navy in 1945 in the spring. The Navy then used them to create a breakwater by scuttling all 24 vessels off the coast of Iwo Jima. When the war was over, the artificial breakwater was abandoned and the ships eventually sank out of sight to the bottom of the sea. And they stayed there, lost to history, until the volcanoes reshaped the terrain and brought them up for air. Number 5. Cold War spy plane. In 1947, a US Army plane crashed on a remote sheet of ice in Greenland. It was a B-29 Superfortress named Key Bird on its way to the North Pole for an extremely secret mission at the beginning of what would become the Cold War. It was recently spotted by NASA, who used a digital camera attached to their P-3 Orion airplane to take a snapshot of the wrecked plane sticking out of the snow all these years later. According to Live Science, the plane went down because of bad weather and because it ran out of fuel. It had no choice but to make an emergency landing on a frozen lake. The 11 men inside the aircraft survived the rough landing, but had to spend 3 days hungry in the middle of nowhere before they were finally rescued. 40 years after the plane crashed, the test pilot, Daryl Greenemeyer, tried to restore the lost plane. However, the plane caught fire and he was forced to abandon the project. Nobody appears to have any plans of getting the plane out of the ice. It really is in a barren patch of land where such a project would cost a ridiculous amount of money. For now, the snow is at least keeping the Key Bird preserved and in good shape. Number 4. King Tiger tank. A King Tiger tank was found back in 2001 underneath a road in France. These terrifying machines were used by the Germans in World War II for decimating the other European forces. As of right now, the tank is split into 2 parts. The turret has already been rescued and is undergoing restoration, but the rest of the tank is still stuck in the ground near Paris. According to historical records, the tank was from the 101 SS Abteilung, and it was lost when it fell into a crater in August of 1944. After that, the tank was blown to pieces by a scrap dealer who took all the big chunks to salvage. The rest of the tank, the pieces that were too big to take away, were just left in the dirt, and a new road was built after the war, directly over top of the tank's hull. Technically, the tank is now property of the city of Fontenay-Saint-Péray. One of the reasons the city has been so apprehensive to dig up the tank is that they believe some of its shells could be live and they could explode. An agreement must be worked out between the French Army Service and the city to excavate the Tiger tank without accidentally blowing someone up. Seems like this is something that should be taken care of sooner rather than later. Number 3. The barbette of the USS Arizona. On December 7, 1941, the USS Arizona sank. For those with a good memory, you'll know that this was the day that the Japanese attacked the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Over 1,170 crewmen on the USS Arizona were killed, resulting in one of the most devastating surprise naval attacks in human history. The USS Arizona was built in Brooklyn back in 1914. It entered the service in 1916 and was one of only 2 Pennsylvania-class battleships. At the time, it was one of the most heavily armed ships in the Navy. It had a dozen 14-inch guns. It was 608 feet long, and it had a displacement of 31,400 tons. During World War I, the USS Arizona didn't actually do any fighting. It kept watch along the eastern coastline. In 1918, it escorted the ship carrying President Woodrow Wilson to the Paris Peace Conference. Fast forward to 1941. The Arizona was one of 4 major battleships that sank during the Japanese surprise attack. The USS Arizona sank about 40 feet, 12 meters deep, but not all of it was submerged. The ship actually kept burning in some parts for over 2 days. In 1958, the wreckage of the USS Arizona was deemed so important that it should have a memorial. Elvis Presley did a benefit concert at Pearl Harbor, which helped raise a massive amount of money for the memorial. It was opened in 1962 as a giant concrete and steel structure spanning the wreckage of the ship. Even though the USS Arizona is lost under the sea, the memorial is floating right above it. Have you ever seen it? Let us know in the comments below. Number 2. USS Wasp. The USS Wasp, or at least what's left of it, has been discovered nearly 3 miles, 4.8 kilometers deep in the Pacific, resting at the bottom of the ocean. It was found in an area known as the Abyssal Plain, arguably the spookiest part of the ocean. It's a place with no light, very few sea creatures, and a huge amount of pressure. The pressure is so immense that if you were to go down there, you would be crushed and your brains might squirt out of your eyes. The USS Wasp was carrying 71 planes and over 2,000 men in September of 1942. The aircraft carrier was escorting a convoy of U.S. Marines to Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. But before they could make it, the USS Wasp was ambushed by Japanese forces. Torpedoes struck the aircraft carrier, with one of them hitting the magazine. This set off a devastating series of explosions, which caught the boat on fire. As it took on water and slowly sank, it also burned. Oil and gas spilled into the ocean. Captain Sherman had to give the order to abandon ship, and everyone who wasn't dead got away in the life rafts. When the dust settled, 193 men had been killed. On the other hand, 1,469 survivors were rescued, according to War History Online. As for its rediscovery over 70 years later, it was thanks to Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft. His fascination with wrecked ships from World War II and all his money allowed him to hire a team and procure the latest technology, including underwater drones and robots. With all this tech, it was easy for him to track down and document the underwater wreckage of the USS Wasp. Number 1. Wrecked steam trawler. All that remains of the steam trawler, called the Sheraton, is a broken hull on the beach. If you were to walk past it, you probably wouldn't even realize you were looking at the remains of a warship. The craft was built in 1907, used as a fishing vessel, and then turned into a warship when things turned hostile in the North Sea. It was in these days that the Europeans were getting a little nervous about a united Germany growing stronger. And for good reason, because the war was declared in 1914. The British Royal Navy took the steam trawler and turned it into an anti-submarine patrol boat. Then, in World War II, it was taken again by the Navy and armed with a gun. After the war, the Sheraton was painted yellow and then used as a target. It was anchored off the coast, but high winds in 1947 caused it to stray away from its moorings and settle on the beach. Nobody ever bothered to take it away, and so it's just been sitting there, decaying ever since. It's still there today, but probably not for much longer. Let us know in the comments, and thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe and come back again for more awesome videos. See you next time. Bye!